I think there are lots of different levels of philanthropy here. I mean, we recognize the levels of indigenous philanthropy. There's a lot of community philanthropy that's going on where people take action in their communities and use what little resources they have. If we're going to look at philanthropy as it's termed in a global sphere, I think it's a growing movement. We certainly have a long history of philanthropic foundations. Some of them are quite substantial. And there are new ones being set up all the time, and it fascinates me when I speak to lawyers, financial services companies, how this continues to take place. Under the radar, people are very quiet about what they're doing, but there's clearly an awareness in this country of the need to give back.
We need to do a lot more public education to help people realize that philanthropy isn't only about CSI, corporate social investment. It's not only about positioning your business such that it gets attention from the political parties. I actually personally also think that we need greater transparency in the giving by business to political parties.
Some funders are not interested in deep systemic problems. They want to do soup kitchens and school shoes and provide 10,000 school shoes to children in rural areas. There's a need for that. There's the need for humanitarian aid. That's not philanthropy. That's much more of a charitable approach to the work. It's not necessarily addressing the underlying inequality issues. It's not necessarily addressing the systems issues. The anti-apartheid movement was very powerful in terms of being able to mobilize resources from all over the world for a human rights, social justice issue. And if you think of how difficult it is to mobilize resources now around issues of land, it's practically impossible. And so the appetite for the issues that South African civil society faces and globally that the human rights movement faces is not as powerful as it was 25 years ago. I think the funders that have traditionally funded social justice work still fund social justice work. They've maybe changed strategies along the way, but we're not seeing enough new funders come on board willing to embrace social justice. And we need to ask ourselves why. How do people see social justice? Is it the word social justice that puts local philanthropy off? Or are people not engaging in philanthropy and engaging more in charity?
One of the emerging conversations has been around what we define as philanthropy, because there's been I guess a call by local people to redefine what philanthropy means, because there's giving. Giving is in the DNA of Africa, but that's not called philanthropy. So horizontal philanthropy is usually it takes the back seat because people are more used to vertical forms of philanthropy. Individual giving is another area that I think is not sufficiently tapped. And I think that, especially individual givings for social justice causes. One of the other areas that has more to support is community philanthropy. And that's, also emerging. It's not, great at the moment, but there's certainly energy around the growth of community philanthropy at the moment.
That now is the time where people finally are able to see the value of a democracy, the value of preserving a democracy, and the value of actually paying for it for themselves. So one of the issues that we're dealing with right now is everybody wants a free and independent media, but nobody wants to pay for it. And you can't, for indefinitely rely on international donors and international individual philanthropists to fund the very safeguards of a democracy that you would like to enjoy, whether you're a person who's Indian or white or colored or African. The point is, we're now at that stage where everybody realizes what we actually fought for, what we should be preserving. And I think now people's perceptions and attitudes are changing towards why it's important to give money beyond just providing for basic humanitarian supplies. I think people are finally understanding why an independent media or funding an independent media or funding public interest litigation or funding the rights advocacy for sex workers or LGBTI groups is as important as providing toilets for school children.
We were supported for many years in this country by funders that came from outside of South Africa, because at that time we didn't have a democratic government and there was work that needed to be done, which needed to be funded. And now we have a democratic government. The need continues for funding to come into the country, but we think that there is a greater need to build our own local philanthropy.
The one advantage that international foundations and donors have, particularly where they have been initially started out by very, very wealthy business people in other parts of the world, is that they all came from contexts and climates where they were part of a maturing or quite a matured democracy, where they had the benefit of a constitution for maybe 30, 40, 50 years. And so they have with them, I think, a lot of wisdom and experience in democracy building in the rest of the world, and they bring a particular global experience. And I think that that's been a great catalyst. I think the work that Atlantic has done, the work that OSF is doing, the work that Ford has done, has been a catalyst for the type of society we want to live in and for the type of democracy we want to enjoy.